Hello, everyone. My name is Nishi and I'm your host for today's podcast. And I'm joined by Miss Rama Akkiraju. Hello, Miss Akkiraju. How are you?
Hi, Nishi. I'm doing very well. I hope you're doing well too. Happy Sunday and really excited to be on your podcast. Thanks for inviting me.
Thank you for being here. So a little bit of background about Miss Akkiraju. She is an IBM fellow and the CTO of AIOps, and she's also the master inventor at IBM Automation. So my first question is, how did you get started and how did you develop your interest in the technology field?
Nishi, I grew up in India, and this was about 25 years ago or so. My brother was the first one in our family to take up engineering as his main area of study, and he was 3 years older than me. And watching him go through, being an engineer, passing that, very difficult to crack entrance exam after your high school, I observed him and, naturally I kind of followed his footsteps. This was around the time when, technology and IT industry was really booming. And in India, there wasn't yet many big tech companies yet, but the initial, the ones that existed, Infosys and Wipro and such, they were starting to hire more techies, and the engineering colleges and universities were popping up everywhere. So that was the time. And for me, my brother was my role model. I saw him and I just kind of naturally followed his footsteps. But as I got into it, as I learned more about the different disciplines in engineering, like be it computer science or electronics or electrical engineering, or civil engineering, mechanical engineering, chemical engineering, there was like a plethora of things that you could do. And depending on your interest, you can get into any one of those areas. And as I got more into it, I was drawn to computers and computer science and the electronic chips and the telecommunications that power these computers and the technology behind. So that's kind of how I ended up studying in college I would say electronics and communications engineering back then, and I studied computer science after I came to the United States.
So building on the topic of college, I wanted to talk about your education's impact on your career. So were there any specific college like interests or activities or any efforts or clubs that you joined that really helped to continue to cultivate your passion or your interest?
So, let me first interpret the education impact one and answer that before I get to clubs and such. What you study and the discipline that you study in college, of course, is very important, and that will open up your doors into your first job, whatever that may be in your career. But once you are in, what really matters is how quickly are you able to learn new things, and your ability to learn and your willingness to learn is a skill that will serve you very well lifelong. Because whatever you learn in a university, in a college, at the time when you just enter the workforce, will be relevant at that point in time. But as you know very well, technology field changes so fast, and new advancements are being made in pretty much every field, from chips to the algorithms, the machine learning algorithms, to the various mechanisms by which technology can be delivered, be it cloud-based technologies and the compute, the stack underneath. Everything is constantly evolving and is advancing. So whatever you learn in university is not going to be enough as years progress in your career. So what you have to do is to be a lifelong student and lifelong learner, and that is what will really have the most impact in your career. And for that, you have to have that curiosity and willingness to learn and that interest to learn. And the good thing these days is that, with these online platforms like Coursera, Udemy, and such, there is so much content and useful information and courses that are available for everybody to learn and take advantage of. That is phenomenal, because if I look back like 25 years ago, 20 years ago, when we were just entering workforce, books, of course, were your only were main source of your continued learning, or any kind of educational curriculum programs and such that the company that you're working in will put together for employees' continued learning. Those were the sources, and often, they would kind of fall behind the changes, the fast-paced changes that are happening in the industry. So that, but thankfully, right now that all that has changed, and with these MOOC platforms, like these massive online learning platforms like Coursera, Udemy, you have access to such great curriculum and courses from such accomplished educators and academicians and industry practitioners, that makes it easy for you to learn whichever subject whenever you want, and makes it easy also for you to keep yourself updated. So that, I would say, is really the critical part of it. Education, of course, whatever degree you got in whichever university is an important door opener for you, but after that, what serves you well is really, what you keep learning and your ability to learn. So coming back to the other question you asked about clubs and such, I'm a strong believer in actually being an all-round person, to bring your whole self to problem solving. Again, I can speak from my personal experiences growing up in India. It was a very unidimensional education system, right? You had to, because it was a country of 1 billion people, the only way to stand out and only way to really make it is by cracking these very hard, complex entrance exams, but that test you only on your analytical and problem solving skills in the specific subjects that you are going in for, be it medicine or your engineering or whatever, right? But what they don't really test or assess is who are you as a person? What kind of problem solving skills do you have when you're put in a completely new environment, that completely new context for which you don't have any reference points? And how fast are you able to learn in such a setting? And how do you work with your people around you? How do you communicate your ideas? And are you able to deal with the pressures and tensions that work culture brings, and all of that? None of those multi-dimensions of students are tested. And for me, I would take education in the broadest context and say, it's all of those things, right? Knowing your subject matter in the field of your specialty is very important, but that's not enough. That's a necessary but not sufficient set of skills. And you have to have all these other skills about being able to communicate your ideas, being able to work with others, and being able to deal with complex situations and conflicts, and being able to keep your calm and cool, and be a team player when you have to, and be a leader when you need to. All of those skills are extremely important. For that, I would say, things like be participating in sports and learning music, which helps you connect various things in your neurons and your brain to keep you fresh, and in many known and unknown ways to keep your mind agile. Team sports, music, and any kind of a team activity that forces you in some way to collaborate with others to get something done. All these are important attributes of it. For me, again, I can only speak from my own personal experience. If you're asking back when I was growing up in my undergrad, were there any clubs that I was part of and such? There was not that much of a culture. We were so heads down, just studying and getting good grades, and and focusing on our studies. That's pretty much was it. It's only after I came to the US that I got exposed to the variety of activities that students participate in universities here, and the amazing scope and breadth of things that they can take advantage of and learn from and such. Yeah, but that was kind of already too late. I wasn't spending like 4 years in college or something. It was when you come in here for grad school. I was doing master's in computer science for 2 years, and again, as an international student, you're adjusting and all that. So for me, I would say that's one regret. I didn't get a chance to really take advantage of a lot of those types of things. I wish I had done a team sport. I wish I had learned to play an instrument, and I wish I had done I would say speech and debate type of was part of a club that would have helped me earlier on in improving communication skills and confidence and all of those things. But here, I mean, now, when I look back, those were the opportunities that I wish I had that I didn't, because of the context and the environment that I was growing up in India, back in early 80s and 90s. But now here, I mean, this message may be going out to kids in different parts of the world, and that may still be the case for many of them, unfortunately. But the good news is that now the world is more connected, right? Because the world is more connected, there is more awareness of what's happening and what is possible, what's available, and it's possible to connect with such opportunities that may exist in other parts of the world, even though you may not have anybody local there, or to for you to be the leader in initiating something like that. At least now you get to know that such things it's possible, and others are doing things like that and get things going. So I think that awareness and the connected world helps a lot in getting the message out. So I mean, if this message is going out to underserved children in different parts of the world, I would say that's the message, right? That don't feel left out. In the world, the connected world, you have resources, access to so many people who are willing to help you and uplift you. So take advantage of those. Like, for example, this Chicode organization that Nishi, that you are running. I'm sure if somebody reached out and say, hey, how would I start a speech and debate club in my local area, or how would I want to do some team sports or something that improves the communication skills, what would I do, or maybe English speaking skills, I'm sure you can find a way to pull up your resources to help such kids, right? So it's only a matter of asking now. So that's what I would advise. Not everybody has the fortune of having access to all of those clubs and extracurricular activities and such. I've seen some schools where they barely have even any chairs and tables to sit on. Kids, even in middle school to high school, still sit on the floor, and there is one blackboard with chalk still that is so hard to see for kids who are sitting in the back, and they are run in crammed rooms, no playgrounds, nothing. These are all still realities for many parts of children in many parts of the world. So the question really is, how do we spread the awareness, and how do we provide access to kids in different parts of the world to such things, by starting in whatever way, in small ways, to help them to have access to some of these things. Yeah, so I don't have much to say about my own clubs, the participation and all that, for the same reasons that I mentioned, that by the context and the environment and the country that I grew up in is very different, and it was so unidimensional, focused on education as defined as cracking exams and doing well in your tests.
I think you offered some very amazing insight. I wanted to highlight one thing that you said. I think often people think that college is the only way to gain education about a certain topic, let it be CS or otherwise. And I think you mentioned an important point that you can learn from anywhere, whether that be Coursera or Udacity or anything. Just learning and finding and having that passion to learn is more important than let's say like where you learn it or how you learn it. So I think that's a very important point that you raised. And going into our next segment, we do something called a Mythbuster, where we try to address common misconceptions in tech. So as you know, many of our students are first-time people in tech. So their family hasn't been in tech and they are venturing into a new field. So my question for you is, what are some common misconceptions about working in tech, and specifically if there are any for women working in tech?
Okay. Well, there are all kinds of misconceptions out there. Depends on the environment, that the company that you're in and the culture there is, and such. I have heard things anywhere from, I haven't experienced any of these, thankfully. And, I'm very fortunate to be working in a company where, there is absolutely no dearth of opportunities for anybody who's talented. Doesn't have any bearing whatsoever on their gender or their any kind of orientation in life. And I'm fortunate to be in such an environment. But I've seen and I've heard situations where, women leaders aren't taken very seriously. They're perceived to be soft and not decisive and assertive. That's one I have heard. But on the other hand, I have also heard that women who, and as in some cases I have noticed and observed, women who are assertive are somehow associated with the label of being a bully or perceived in a negative way. Whereas the same amount of assertiveness would not be perceived in any bad connotation if it was exhibited by a man. And that I have heard that happens. There were work-life balance things that are real for many women raising children. If women have to take maternity leave or have to deal with childcare type of things, that could be perceived as something that you're not fully committed to your job, and therefore you may be passed up for promotions. And that I know for many women is a real thing. Although when you really look at the facts, actual data, I've seen some studies where when the actual scrum, that is the development process, and the velocity of how much work gets done and how fast work gets done in a particular 2-week, 4-week period when developing software, it is apparently proven, or in the studies it's been noted, that when there were more women on the team, the velocity of the team is much higher than otherwise. So facts may be telling a completely different story, whether women have any kind of childcare responsibilities at home or not. That work gets done no matter what, but perceptions still do exist, I think, in some of these cases. And also, there are other kinds where women are good at being followers than leaders, is another perception, where when a recipe is given, they execute it well, but when the recipe needs to be created or figured out, or new innovation needs to be brought out, that it has to be men who drive it. Again, these are all myths and perceptions that at some point or the other existed and were expressed and felt by women who have shared their own personal episodes and such. I think many of them are real. As I said, I haven't thankfully experienced those things ever. Even growing up in a middle-class family in India, actually, I haven't experienced that in my own family. Thankfully, my dad was such a supporter of education for everybody. We were 3 girls and 1 boy in our family, in my siblings. And my dad was just as supportive and encouraging for all of us to study and get higher education, and even took loans to send me to the United States when I said I wanted to go. So thankfully for me, that didn't happen, but that the discrimination and the pulling back, of women to say, you focus on certain kinds of things that will make you a good homemaker as opposed to a good leader and risk taker, start very early on in families. In actually, they get reinforced at in their households, and this is a reality for many folks. And so, yeah, I mean, we have to start fighting these perceptions and ideas from grassroots at that level, in starting with how girls are raised versus how boys are raised in families, so that first of all, girls are given equal opportunity to bring their best talents out, and similarly, more importantly, to raise girls with the confidence that they're no less, right, than their male siblings. Otherwise, what will happen is that those subtle, in many small subtle ways, you are constantly cultured and trained to pull yourself back, to not put yourself out there, to not boldly speak or to take risks. And that kind of carries into your what you end up studying, and how you do your work, and how you carry yourself in a workplace too. So in some ways, if there are perceptions, you could argue that those perceptions to some extent may have been representative of how girls from day one have been brought up, right? And maybe that's why the behavior is that way. In some cases, it's actually nothing to do with that. It's just perceptions. In some cases, the behavior may be that way, but it's all attributable to their upbringing and the whole culture and the expectations of society and such. It has nothing to do with the innate ability of girls or women. So that is where we have to kind of address it at many levels. And I know this topic has been something that it comes up often, and it gets discussed a lot, and there are many efforts that are underway at various levels to address these things at various levels, including from grassroots and families to middle school to high school to college and in workplaces and all that. But we still have long ways to go, because these are centuries old perceptions and traditions that have been so ingrained in some cultures that it is so hard to change. Hopefully change will come about so that we can really unleash the full potential of everybody, right? That's when our society will progress, our economy will be able to really benefit from the best that everybody can bring, as opposed to only half of the population can bring.
Absolutely. I think you shed light on a very important subject. And I think it's our duty as people who have been given opportunities to help others and create opportunities for other people. So my question to you is now, like, looking at a position to when you were younger, what advice would you give to your younger self? Like, would you have done anything differently, or is there something you recommend that all people do?
To me, I mean, personally, the advice I would give to myself is I wish I had done team sport and was active in a sport. So I would tell myself that if there is any opportunity to go back and change that and do it. But again, as I said, when I look back, this is not to kind of defend myself in any way, but it's just that context, that opportunity, that environment was not there at all. But what I can say is that this is what I would advise to youngsters now. Yeah, create your environments, create your opportunities. Don't wait for somebody to create that context, right? That is what I would have. If I had some role models, maybe I would have formed a mini sports club in our own team, in our own school, and not wait for somebody to say, hey, there is a sports league and there are selections going on, go join, those kind of things, right? So I think the key is really that creating opportunities for yourselves. And for that, you have to know that the constraints that you're presented with are actually not constraints. They're, they can be easily broken. You just have to find a way to get out of the box that you're in and explore. And that's the thing. So I would have liked to play a sport. As I said, I would have loved to be part of clubs like speech and debate. That would have significantly helped me improve my confidence and communication skills early on. That's one thing I would have done. I would have learned to play a musical instrument, because I cannot understate the importance of music in one's life, and how music can, in many known and unknown ways, connect various pathways to enrich one's life, and help in improving our ability to learn. Yeah, I mean, education-wise, I was always so driven, and always that is something that was the most important thing in my life. So there's nothing more I could tell myself to do better off there. But being an all-rounded individual is something that I would tell myself, and I would kind of, by way of extending that, to say to others who are, watching this, to say, create those opportunities for yourself so that you can be an all-rounded individual.
Okay, so with this newfound motivation, I think the main question is, what can we do now? So how can students who are going into college or soon to go to college, how can they get involved in D&I initiatives, or start their own, or expand their leadership to their local communities through organizations or through clubs?
Nishi, I think what you are doing is exactly what more kids should be doing more of, right? You have founded this, as you are sharing your story, personal story with me as to why you started this Chicode. I'm so impressed and moved by that you saw your mom contributing to kids in an orphanage, and that got you thinking about why those kids are living the life they are living, and I am living the life that I'm living, which is a much privileged life than they have. And you started this initiative and said, I'm going to do whatever I can in my own way to help students around the world to have more access and awareness to opportunities out there. And you're bringing in different folks, such as me, to share their own personal experiences. And this is a great way to get started, right? I mean, either you start your own initiative and with your passion make it big, or join one to learn more about, first of all, what is it? What are the is this real? Is this issue of diversity and inclusion, is this real, or is this something? Be skeptical. There is nothing wrong with being skeptical. You don't have to take everything that's being told as granted, or that these myths really are these really myths, or are these really this kind of issue really exists. So question, that's a great way to get started. Make fact-based decisions, right? Really look at data. Anecdotes are good, but they can be biased. Or they can bias you because you're only listening to certain stories and making your judgments based on that. So always look for broad, statistically significant types of trends, and make your decisions or make your judgments based on facts. Then I would say, if you really believe that this is a problem, that we need to diversity of thought, diversity of actions, diversity of ideas, diversity in discussion will always lead to better outcomes in anything, in projects, in ideation, in workplace, in the outcomes that get produced for products that you build or anything. So what efforts can be made to really more consciously bring that diversity and inclusion? So everybody can make their own start, as I said, like you start their own thing, or first question, do some studies, and people like you, when you graduate, say, from your college here at Berkeley, and you enter your workforce, and you slowly start to climb up the ranks in tech world, and you become a manager yourself, and you will have to face these decisions at some point. So this awareness that you currently have, this background and the work that you're putting into it to help you really understand the diversity and inclusion topic will serve you well in hiring the right kind of folks to your team and in achieving better outcomes. So if somebody is wondering why should I care about it? What's in it for me? I think there is a lot of benefit for people who are interacting with folks with different points of view, different ideas, and who bring different perspectives that enriches your own understanding of the world, your own understanding of a particular problem or a project or a topic, and it leads to better outcomes. So that's what it's for you. In the end, you will become a better person, and you will be able to consider multiple perspectives before making a decision. And in pretty much anything that you do later in life, it could lead to better outcomes. It could be about some personal thing that you're doing, or it could be about some project that you are leading or driving in your workplace, or it could be even a joint project that you're doing in your university, right? Yeah, so to come back and summarize, right, what are the things that they can do? First thing is be aware, right? Ask yourself the questions and get yourself the facts and about why diversity is important and inclusion is important. Then take steps. It could be something as simple as you being open to that topic and idea, all the way to you doing something about it, such as making it, bringing more awareness, such as like the initiatives that you are leading, or being part of broader organizations. But keep this in mind as you go into workforce, that you are the next generation set of leaders. You set the standards for the hiring of the workforce and how people feel included once they are in the workforce, and how they their ideas are and whatever their orientation is respected, and that so that they can bring their whole selves to the workplace. And that's when, or to their studies, that's when the best ideas come out, that's when the best outcomes come out.
So on the topic of aware, I actually wanted to share an example. I was reading an article and it was about Melinda Gates, and she was saying that, when I go and help people in different countries and different regions, I don't just show up with my opinions and my ideas of how to help a certain region or a certain country. I try to look at what are their cultures and how do they operate. So for example, she said, when I go to villages in India, what I do is I go talk to the mother-in-law, because she is typically the hierarchy, like she would be in the higher ends of the hierarchy. And she said, I would talk to her first and see how does she run the operation or the family. And then accordingly, she will introduce her ideas slowly. So I think it's being aware and also understanding how to help people instead of just, I would say, placing your ideas on them.
So well put, Nishi. Yeah, it's about really listening and understanding, right? So what works for you doesn't work in other contexts, in other countries, in other places. The solutions are, there are many ways to do things, and certain ways work better in certain contexts than certain others. And that will come about only when you listen and understand the context, and have the folks who are local in that context really come up with what their problems are, and what would work for them as a solution. Of course, having exposure to what others are doing and what's possible is great. But you're absolutely right. What works in one country may not work in other country, or what works in one context may not work in other context. And there are so many examples that are cited. Initially when I know when Bill Gates Foundation, since you talked about Melinda Gates, I just wanted to kind of recollect that example, because Bill Gates started Microsoft and was in computer industry. Initially, he donated computers to African countries, right? And so they put up these computers with the Microsoft Windows in kiosks in some remote villages in Africa, just kind of studying what do people do, how do they use it, and so on. And that was like, what do people do with it? How does that help them when they're dying of malaria and don't even have good drinking water and don't have access to toilets? What good would a computer do to them? And you can see now that over the past several decades, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation actually then realized that that's not what they want. What they want is really proper hygiene, education, and vaccines for treating malaria so that they can be alive the next day to do something with their lives, as opposed to going to a kiosk and playing computers. So the context is very different. And even for fresh water, right? How do you bring fresh water to certain locations is not as simple as laying underground water pipes and with faucets bringing that to people. It's just the government structure, the corruption, and the amount of time it takes, and the red tape that's involved may not make it possible for such a thing to happen in the next few years and to several years. And so what do you do now, right? What are the solutions that you can do to bring fresh water to people? Can they take rainwater and use some kind of cheap and low cost but good quality filters to filter out that rainwater and get good quality drinking water? These are the kind of the local innovations, right, that were needed for such places and such countries. So you're absolutely right. You brought up a very good point that it's not a cookie cutter thing. The world doesn't work that way. One has to find those solutions. And for that, you need to listen to people in those areas to understand, first of all, what their point of view, their problems are, and then design solutions. I'm reminded of this other example where they were building schools for girl students, and okay, you say, okay, these kids don't have good nutrition. First, what's the point of sending them to school if they don't even have good nutritious food to eat? Their brains are not even receptive to learning anything because their tummy is hungry. They can't listen to anything, and nothing gets into their head. So slowly the midday meals programs and breakfast programs got introduced into schools. And then they later realized that even after all of these things, girl students are dropping out when they get to middle school. And it so turns out because there is no toilets, there is no sanitation, they don't have access to sanitary napkins when during the menstrual cycle. And so it's like, one thing leads to the other. What you take as so granted in other places is just not what happens in other countries. So, to bring middle school children, to keep middle school girls in schools, turns out you need to provide proper clean toilets and give them access to hygiene, and has sanitary pads and so on. So there are so many things that are intermingled, and some of these problems are so specific to those areas and those countries and cultures, and part of this diversity and inclusion that you're talking about really is exactly that, right? That knowing what the problems are, listening, understanding, not assuming, not going in with a solution on day one, but and I think if you abstract those concepts, actually the same concepts hold so true in even a very advanced country like the United States or the Western countries, where some of these problems you can say are more or less, the countries have gone past these a century ago already. Even so, being able to listen to the other point of view, being not assuming, not coming with a solution, not thinking that you have the right answer. These ideas and concepts are so important, and they will serve you so well, even in tech world in Silicon Valley or tech world in the United States, because these are concepts, ideas that really go to the core of what it means to really facilitate diverse ideas and discussions and inclusion. So yeah, I mean, it needs to be interpreted. These concepts needs to be interpreted at different levels in different contexts. But I think at a high level, those concepts are still very valid anywhere, even in advanced countries.
Awesome. Thank you so much for a very stimulating conversation. So if anybody would like to contact Ms. Akkiraju, please do so through LinkedIn. And thank you so much for taking time out of your day to talk to us today. I think we learned a lot.
Thank you so much, Nishi, for having me once again on your podcast, and my very best wishes to you for the success of Chicode. The mission is, and the idea is, so right on, and I commend you for your initiative in running this organization and making a start in whatever way you can to make a difference to the world. You're already making a difference, I can tell. Keep at it.
Thank you.